Recognizing the significance behind African American historical relevance and understanding the events that shifted our nation's traditions centuries ago. This is why I believe recognizing Harriet Tubman, a historical figure like no other, is of utter importance. Like most, Harriet Tubman was a dreamer, but what she chose to do with those dreams is what made her into a hero. The way her story lives on is by each generation continuing to honor what she accomplished and what she went through in order to do so. When we recognize courageousness, fearless acts of duty like Harriet's is one that is utmost deserving of everyone's respect. I plan to magnify Harriet's accomplishments of her life and how she used her ability to save the enslaved, and why hers is one of my favorite success stories of all time and why it should be cherished. Harriet was born into slavery in the early 1800s in a small town in Maryland with 8 other siblings. At 8 years old, she was rented out to the neighbors as a domestic servant. Foreshadowing her later life, Harriet stood up against slavery when she was only 12. It is documented that she tried to stop her masters from abusing another enslaved man, and she was hit with a 2-pound weight that left her with a lifetime of headaches and narcolepsy. Harriet was tough, firm in her beliefs that she was just as much of a human being as anyone else. Although beaten and whipped by her various masters, she never gave up trying to find a way to end slavery. Around the age of 23, although this was not allowed for those who were enslaved, Harriet married John Tubman, a free man. Known as the Moses of her people, she felt as if she was freed, every parent, sibling, and friend should be freed as well, and she never quit on anyone. After Harriet's initial master passed away, his widow began selling his slaves. Harriet explained to her husband that she was not going to wait for the Brodess family to decide her fate, and bravely stated one of her most famous quotes: "There was one of 2 things I had a right to, liberty or death. If I could not have one, I would not have the other." Later that same year, she escaped and made her way to her promised land, Philadelphia. Although her exact route is unknown, Harriet used what we know as the Underground Railroad, which was a secret network of paths for slaves from the south to the north, to guide her way. As she guided her way by night to stay hidden, she followed the North Star and tried to avoid slave catchers trying to collect bounties. She was from safe home to safe home and hid in houses while pretending to work for the families, and each night would manage her way to the next. Due to the other fugitives using her routes to escape slavery, she refused to share her stories and experiences of her escape in order to keep it secret. When she crossed over that Pennsylvania line, she says, "She looked at her hands to see if I was the same person. I felt like I was in heaven." After making it to Philadelphia, she couldn't help but think about her family still trapped in slavery. After hearing about the U.S. Congress passing the Fugitive Slave Law, Harriet became even more motivated to save the hundreds of those still enslaved by leading them to freedom. Starting with several families and then her brothers, she began to bring slaves to freedom one trip at a time, never looking back. As time went on, she started to feel more and more called to return and retrieve more. While she was gone, John, her husband, remarried to a woman named Caroline, and neither wanted any part of Tubman's return. Although dangerous work would seem impossible to most, her integrity and ability to stay focused and driven in her goals made her the ambitious hero we know and love her for today. She had many rules for herself. For example, she normally only made her trips during the winter due to minimizing her risk of getting caught when the nights were longer. She made the smart decision to not leave with slaves until late on Saturday evening because newspapers did not print runaway slaves till Monday morning. She knew all types of ways to disguise herself when traveling. She gave examples of brilliant moments where she was traveling on her own and would run into former or present masters that she recognized. Once she distinguished herself as a woman running errands by carrying a few chickens so no one would question her. She also, at a time, would grab newspapers and pretend to read because she was known to many as illiterate. After Harriet felt as if everyone that was planning to use the Underground Railroad to escape had already been freed, she started to feel comfortable accepting interviews and sharing her experience in successfully bringing slaves into freedom. In these interviews, the public began to finally gain knowledge behind the ins and outs of how Harriet used the Underground Railroad as her escape along with hundreds of others. As these interviews continued and became more in-depth, the public was able to begin documenting her stories to have to pass on for years following. Many interviewers, including a man by the name of Thomas Garrett, stated he had never met a person of any color that had more confidence in the voice of God and believed that it was spoken directly to her soul. Her courage was unlike any others, and something that each of those that were granted the opportunity to interview her could not believe. She explained that her religious faith helped her along the way and guided her onto each right path. She also said she constantly consulted with God and knew that as long as she was traveling, he would keep her safe. She was spiritually, which is a genre of music that was specifically created for the generations of African Americans to use in their heritage. As coded messages warned fellow travelers, or she would sing them if she witnessed a clear path to take. She was famous for changing lyrics to songs that only enslaved people would know to translate whether it was safe or dangerous to go on. Harriet never moved further in her travels if she felt it was unsafe to those she was leading. She made sure that before they made their next move, everyone was guaranteed safety. Although she kept her brave face on for all, she feared that before each trip it could be her last. But never once did she allow her fear to get in the way from helping someone else. And the beauty of her success was found in her words she shared as she moved each fugitive across the border. She would speak, "Glory to God and Jesus too, one more soul is safe," and all would rejoice and sing songs of joy. Truman's fearlessness was unmatched. She never went on a trip without carrying her revolver, and those that knew her also knew that she was not afraid to use it. It gained her some protection that she knew she needed, with the endless amount of slave catchers running far and wide with their dogs searching for her for an incentive. Not only was she protecting herself, she was also protecting her tribe that followed. She made it known to all that went with her might fear and want to turn back, but she would never allow it. She knew that if just one fugitive wanted to go back, the whole group would be found and captured to return back if they would never have another chance of freedom ever again. It was reported that on one of her trips, a man that was traveling with her threatened to turn back due to low morale among the group of fugitives. Those that were there witnessed Harriet pointing a gun to his head while stating, "You go on or die." Days later, the entire group made their successful arrival into Canada. At the time, the slave masters in each region were completely unaware that Harriet was responsible for the hundreds of runaway slaves. After many years, sometime in the 1850s, many slaveholders suspected a northern white abolitionist of secretly attracting their slaves to freedom. After Harriet's intentions were revealed, the rewards for the capture totaled to be around $40,000, which include all of the combined bounties that went out for Harriet's capture over the years. This amount equals to be over $1 million in our century today. This reward higher than any other reward offered for a slave before. Her success was of such higher honor that in the year of 1868 there was massive support for Harriet to claim a Civil War military pension. Many believe that the reward that was previously offered for capturing could never attest to how much of an incentive she truly was to the fight of slavery abolishment. There is nothing quite like the story of Harriet Tubman and all that she did in her years of living. Ever since she was young, she knew that her purpose was in life, and she never settled for someone else to rule her destiny. Harriet knew her calling in life was to save lives and end the corset upon African Americans. She was passionate about equality and freedom for all and never stopped until she felt that her purpose in life was filled. Most slaves, after reaching freedom, would have never imagined risking their new life to bring those just like themselves into a life just like the one they had made. Unlike most, Harriet felt the need to help each slave she could, not just her family and friends. Overall, Harriet Tubman's story is incomparable. It is important for each generation to understand the importance of her life and how she accomplished saving each life that she did. It was documented that every slave that she took on her path to slavery resulted in a life of freedom and new beginnings. Harriet illustrated extreme courage and sacrifice during her lifetime, that is, in my opinion, unmatched. I hope that my speech made you all feel inspired by her story and feel a purpose to continue bringing Harriet Tubman's heroism to light. I strongly believe her legacy is like no other and should be remembered by all.